I was too harsh on Triple H for its dullness. Yes, this season is plenty dull, but this season is so much worse. I didn't want to admit that Triple H was better than Ghost Island because I didn't want to give in to the majorly depressing fact about mid-30 Survivor, which is that every season is worse than the one before it. Triple H is worse than Game Changers, Ghost Island is worse than Triple H, and so on. However, the pattern did break with David vs. Goliath and Edge of Extinction, so thank goodness for that. God, there is no way I could conceivably argue that Ghost Island is somehow better than Triple H. After the excruciating, boring 12 hours or so I sat through to watch this snooze fest, it is, without question, the worst season of the modern Dark Ages. It's also the one that production had the least involvement in, so make of that as you will. It's abysmally boring, completely predictable, and arguably the worst of time this show has ever produced since, at the very least, Okay, maybe not the biggest waste of time, but it's certainly up there. At least Redemption Island gave us our Boston Rob victory, at least One World gave us one of the best winners ever, and hey, there's bacon on this BLT. I really wanted to like this season. Not just for the reasons I mentioned earlier, but because I actually really enjoy the premise. A bunch of Survivor relics haunted by the bad decisions of the past? Sign me up! If my enthusiasm for Island of the Idols is indicative of anything, it's that I adore it when Survivor appreciates its history in an unbelievably corny way. I thought this premise had promise, and, to its credit, this premise of haunted relics is not the reason the season sucks so much. Although it does have the drawback of reminding us of other, better seasons of Survivor that you could be watching instead of this mess. I don't even know where to start. This season is so devoid of anything actually interesting, I'm having a hard time talking about it. It seems I'll have to go back to the One World drawing board and just talk about the few interesting or relevant characters of the season. Do I? Well, actually, speaking of One World, this season is outward very similar to One World. It's almost as if Kim had split herself into another personality and the two Kims ran the game together. But I'm constantly putting One World near the top of these season rankings at the end of my reviews. So why do I kind of appreciate One World but hate Ghost Island? Ghost Island is going to be in the bottom 5 of these reviews. What gives? Well, this brings up something interesting that I feel needs to be talked about, because it represents a very serious shift when it comes to how Survivor operates with predictable storylines. You see, for as much as I hated One World, I had to admit that on a rewatch, it was quite interesting how much care the editors gave to Kim's story, and how they presented Kim's story in a very compelling and straightforward way, allowing us to always get into Kim's head and see where she is at any given point in time. It wasn't an exciting story, but it was a competent one, and actually kind of interesting in the this is how you win survival tutorial way that the season is edited. This doesn't have it because it doesn't revolve around Dominic and Wendell's long-term game plans. It revolves around Laurel's story, and Donathan's story, and Kellen's story, and Michael's story. And that would be fine, but unlike One World, there is no forward momentum in any of these stories. Their stories just stay static from episode to episode, and nothing ever changes in each of their respective tales. What's Michael's story? He just wants to survive one more day. Does anything else change in this story? Do events in one episode lead satisfyingly to the next one? No, of course not, because his position never actually changes. He's still always at the bottom after the second swap, and he's still always in danger of getting voted out. The only reason he isn't voted right away is because A, idols, and B, he successfully, for a short time anyway, is very good at pushing people in front of the chopping block before him, aka sacrificing his only hope for a long-term game simply for the benefit of surviving 3 more extra days. But who could blame him? Malolo never had the numbers advantage, and Navidi was just simply not going to jump ship. Speaking of which, what's Kellen's story? Navidi strong. That's basically it. There is no other added layer or nuance to her story whatsoever. Just trust your gut and be Navidi strong and get angry when they vote Morgan out at the swap because, guys, how dare you not abide to the arbitrarily drawn buffs that were given to us at the beginning of the game? She tries to vote Laurel out on numerous occasions and then tries to enlist Laurel to help her vote out Donathan and Wendell, which doesn't work because, no shit, of course it wouldn't work. You tried to vote her out. Why would she betray Dominic and Wendell? Speaking of, what's Laurel's story? Will she flip on her allies? Every single episode. It's the same shit over and over again. with no changes. Again, things in one episode don't lead to the next one because it's a reset every time. They dangle this thread in front of your face in the hopes that you'll think, maybe they'll get Laurel out this time, but eventually you catch on, and you just get angry at both the editors and Laurel. Laurel for going back and forth, and the editors for acting like you're an idiot and that you'll fall for the same shit again. Laurel even keeps saying that she knows she has to get them out for her to win at Final Tribal Council, but she never does so. Mostly because she doesn't know if she'll get to Final Tribal Council without their help. They're her safety net, so she's put in an impossible situation. Unfortunately, it seems that Laurel's best shot at winning really was to take Dominic and Wendell to the end. But she should have at least taken that risk. Even if she knows for sure that she can't trust Chelsea or Desiree or Kellen, she also knows for sure that she can't beat the two best competitors in a jury vote. When laid out like that, Donathan's story doesn't sound so bad. But the point is, like One World, the narratives of the season center around a handful of people. And unlike One World, the story is engaging because, as my original point stated, nothing ever changes episode to episode. The season of all 4 of these contestants stays static, with no development character-wise or story-wise. Laurel's is the worst because it's so predictable and insulting. Like I said earlier, if the results of the season were this predictable, then they should have just told the story from Dominic and Wendell's point of view, and really let us delve into their thought process and game mechanics the same way One World did with Kim. But it's like they can't. Like, the negative reception of One World was so bad that they just fill up an entire Survivor season's worth of airtime with the Survivor equivalent of will they, won't they. Suspense only goes so far, especially when this season's story is as limp as it is. We know Laurel's never going to flip on the guys. Stop treating us like we're idiots. Christ, they're even pulling this shit in the freaking finale? How dumb do you think we are? Here's the catch-22 though. Even if the story itself isn't really focused on Dominic and Wendell, the edit is. They dominate so much airtime, it's just very little that actually goes to detailing and explaining their strategy. We don't get to learn much about them strategy-wise. But since they're such a focal point of the season, we figure out they're going to win rather early on. Once you know that, it's such a slog to get through the rest of the season. Even on a rewatch, when you know what it's all leading up to, it's just impossible to care about any of these people because you know it's all moot. You know all of the strategy is just incredibly pointless. There's no way Angela or Sebastian or Michael or Kellen or Chelsea, or God forbid, Libby are winning. It's the Dom and Wendell show. They're the main stars. The problem is, they're not the main characters. Casting dropped the ball so hard when it came to this cast. I mean, what is this? I don't know. How in the world do you end up with a cast with, like, so many duds? There's maybe 9 people that are worth remembering from this cast, and half of them are eliminated pre-merge. There are so many non-entities on this cast, it's almost funny. I mean, we got Chelsea, Desiree, Jenna, Libby, Michael, Angela, Sebastian. Good God, this is bad. Really bad. Was eye candy the most defining factor when casting this season? I don't get it. How do you cast a season this bad? This may be... You don't know. This is the worst cast ever assembled in the history of Survivor, bar none. Yeah, I feel confident saying that. And the characters that are interesting, most of them get voted off in the pre-merge. Fun fact, this creates some sort of fallacy that the pre-merge is somehow way better than the post-merge. This is a fallacy, seeing as how, besides like 2 or 3 episodes and one pretty perfect pre-merge episode, the pre-merge is just as boring as the rest of the season, especially after the tribe swaps. Oh god, the tribe swaps. Malolo is down in numbers in every swapped tribe, and this just results in boring and dull tribal councils where the end result is already well dictated and well decided long before the contestants sit down at tribal council. There's like one near flawless perfect episode in this entire season, and no, I'm not talking about the merge episode. Because the merge episode is funny at the very end, but it's not a great one. The best episode is the one where Morgan gets blindsided. I was going to get into why this one episode in particular is so good, but this season has drained me so thoroughly, I'm not even sure I have the energy to... never mind, what the heck, let's do it. After the first tribe swap, New Navidi has 5 Navidis and 4 Malolos. They lose the first immunity challenge as a new tribe, and Chris is sent to Ghost Island. Dominic and Wendell try to rope in the 4 Malolos to vote out Angela, as she is closely aligned with Dominic's rival Chris. which I guess is the closest thing Dominic gets to a fully fleshed out story, the Dominic-Chris rivalry. Anyway, James takes advantage of the chaos among the Navidi group to take out Dominic's right-hand woman, Morgan. It's a fun blindside, and it's great and awesome, and I love it, and at the time gave me hope that we were in for another sleeper success like we had in Millennials vs. Gen X. Ah, what a fool I was. Bradley's boot episode was pretty good as well, I will admit. The pre-merge of the season really shines when the tribes that haven't gone to Tribal Council go to Tribal Council, because there's all this underlying chaos and bad energy that they haven't gotten to address because they haven't had the chance to address it because they haven't gone to Tribal Council yet. Anyway, Bradley's a douche and his downfall is funny. That's really all it takes for me sometimes. The last talking point I want to address about the season before I close out this video is the historic tie vote that almost made me like the season more than Triple H. Honestly, the whole final tribal is pretty good, even before the tie vote. Look, I know with this new format we don't get amazingly poignant and emotional speeches like Trish's speech in Cagayan or Cats in One World or Reads from Sam Sir, but for every one of those great speeches we would get like 15 other questions that were just variations of the same 3 questions. I can assure you, if we had had the old jury format, this season would have been even worse than it was, because we wouldn't have gotten the amazing back and forth we got from the contenders in this final tribal.
Oh, but boring people like Jenna, Libby, and Chelsea barely got to talk.
I know, and it's great, right? This final tribal is the most compelling thing about Ghost Island. Watching the jury go back and forth on the merits of Wendell and Dominic's respective gameplay styles was way more interesting to me than watching Jenna, Libby, Chelsea, Michael, and Sebastian all ask basically the same question 5 times. I think ironically, even though this jury format is supposed to discourage under-the-radar winners, I actually think it's the opposite effect here, because multiple members of the jury are given ample time to explain how Dominic's unnecessary showboating and theatrics made them feel. It's not just one grandstanding question, they're allowed multiple minutes in the edit, possibly even more in real time, as to how Dominic's theatrics made Sebastian and Donathan feel as human beings. And then Dominic gets the chance to counter and defend himself, saying that if he didn't do all of that stuff at the final 6 tribal, Dominic very well might not have been in the game. You know that back and forth about the importance of jury management versus getting to the end at any cost that we always have all the time on the Survivor Reddit? Well, here it is, happening inside the game. The contestants are having that conversation themselves. At the end, both boys do end up giving their vote to the quieter Wendell, but for once, I don't feel bad or upset because, A, like I said, we saw them talking about their feelings regarding Dominic in great detail, so I understand their choice. B, to be fair, I do kind of see Dominic and Wendell as like 2 halves of one fantastic player. They're both equally deserving, which brings us to the tie vote. The tie vote is something that was used to justify the lopsided editing by really hardcore defenders of the season, which there aren't many to be honest. And during the bulk of my rewatch, I was like, God, that's a stupid defense. This season was so ungodly boring. How could anything justify that? And it almost does. And like I said, the season really should have told the story of the obvious frontrunners instead of just dancing around them, you know, like Kim in One World. But even with the story as it is, told from Laurel's point of view, wondering if she will ever flip, when you get to the end and are reminded of how epic the tie vote really is, it makes you think about the story in a whole new light. It all makes sense. Oh, so that's why the story was centered around these 3 in particular. That's why Laurel was such a focal point. It was about her. It was always about her. She is the linchpin. The entire reason Dominic and Wendell are sitting there in the first place. Almost too perfect to be true. It's like something out of a Greek tragedy. 10 people, all whose games Laurel either indirectly or more often than not directly had a hand in ruining by sticking to her top dogs, all at the end go and decide, alright, we'll grant your wish. We'll all split the votes between the 2 people that you dragged here at the expense of all of our games, and you will get to decide which one you'd like to reward. Because you weren't playing your own game, you were playing theirs. I mean, good God, the votes are even split between the first 5 and the last 5 jurors. How perfect can you get? I mean, this is why Dominic and Wendell were such focal points in the edit. Why it feels like they're basically just 2 halves of the same whole. Because they basically are. It's like So the ending is so amazingly perfect. When Jeff Probst reads those votes at the final tribal council, I got chills the second time watching when I already knew what was going to happen. It is the perfect ending to an otherwise terrible season of Survivor. But that's the problem, isn't it? It's a terrible season of Survivor. Current Dark Ages, I've noticed something. Excluding David versus Goliath, so just including the bad seasons of the new Dark Ages, this is easily the fairest season in terms of gameplay and the rules previously set by production. There's no strange twists at the end, Edge of Extinction isn't in play, no one gets voted out on solely idols. It's the fairest season in the post-Game Changers era, and it's also undeniably the worst of the bunch. Triple H and Edge of Extinction, hell, especially Edge of Extinction, and honestly Game Changers as well, are all entertaining seasons of television in my eyes. The reason I have such issues with those seasons is because of Advantage Geddon, or because the third boot wins, or because the entire foundation of the game is being crumbled right in front of my eyes while Jeff yells in my ear insisting that it's just the game evolving. Ghost Island doesn't have any of that. The rules are set in place and everything is understood beforehand. Nothing about the game is changed during the game. Idols don't go too crazy except for maybe the sheer multitude of them, but like no one abuses their powers like Ben or Rick did. It's all fair, it's just awful. At the end of the day, unless your name is David versus Goliath, you're either going to have a game where everyone is on an equal playing field and everyone understands the rules and they're all fair competitors, or you're going to have an entertaining television show. Survivor the game and Survivor the show are at odds right now because it seems like, at least in this day and age, you can't really have one without the other. This even seems to be the case going into the future, as Winners at War is going to have Edge of Extinction based on the leaks from Redmond. But I mean, the season's going to be good, you guys. It has Parvati and Boston Rob and Sandra and Danny and Sophie and Yule and Tony and Tyson and Natalie and Kim and Ethan and all these great people, but it's still going to be unfair. Honestly, obviously, if I had to choose, well, I wouldn't choose. I would rather have David versus Goliaths. Or, the first 33 seasons of the show where you could be a fair game where the rules aren't changed on a whim and you could have an entertaining season at the same time. But as of now, I will gladly sit through 50 third boot winners if it means I don't ever have to sit through Ghost Island ever again.